How do you build an empire that actually lasts? Seriously, is it all about the sheer will of one single brilliant leader? Or is it built on a foundation of laws that can limit even the most powerful person? Well, today, we're jumping into the 13th century, a time when two totally different answers to that question popped up on opposite ends of the globe. And these answers, they would go on to shape history for centuries.
So that's really the big question, right? On one side, you've got the absolute top-down power of the Mongol conquerors. And on the other, you have a bunch of English nobles basically forcing their king to admit that his power has limits. Two completely different blueprints all playing out in one epic century.
All right, so to really get our heads around the first blueprint, we have to start in China. Because back in the 13th century, the world's biggest economic powerhouse had this one critical vulnerability. And it created this massive power vacuum.
And this is where things get really interesting. It's a huge paradox. Song China was, it was a marvel. Its technology, its culture, it was way beyond what anyone else in the world was doing. But their whole philosophy was focused on peace, which meant the military was kind of put on the back burner. It was this rich, glittering prize, just sitting there, waiting for a strong, organized neighbor to come along and take it.
And you know what? That organized neighbor was right on the doorstep. Out in the vast Eurasian steppe, a new force was gathering, and it was led by a man who was about to completely rewrite the rules of power.
So, let's talk about the guy behind our first blueprint, a man named Temujin. He started out with a pretty simple but powerful idea. He wanted to unite his people and give them a better life. And he had a ruthless, step-by-step plan to make it happen.
And his strategy? It was incredibly methodical. He didn't just win battles, he totally changed how war was fought. He used military innovation and incredible discipline to bring all these warring tribes of the steppe under his control, one by one. And he demanded absolute, unquestioning loyalty. By 1204, he was the undisputed ruler of all the Mongol people.
So to make all this power official, in 1206, he called what's known as a Kurultai, basically a huge meeting of all the chiefs and commanders. And here's the genius part. Just by showing up, they were signaling that they accepted his authority. It was at this meeting that Temujin was given a new name, Chinggis Khan, the universal ruler.
Okay, so with his power totally locked down, Genghis Khan gets to work building his empire. But this wasn't just about conquering stuff. No, this was about creating a single, unified Mongol nation with a clear structure, and it all flowed directly from his personal vision.
He built this thing on some really key foundations. He created the Yasa, which was a unified law code for everyone. He ordered the creation of a written script for the Mongol language, which helped forge a shared identity. And he used that incredibly sophisticated war machine not just to conquer, but to protect the trade routes that were like the lifeblood of his empire.
And the results? It was an explosion of conquest, unlike anything the world had ever seen before. In just 20 years, under his direct command, the Mongol Empire grew to stretch all the way from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. The speed and the sheer scale of it were just breathtaking.
But here's the thing. While one man was building a massive empire based on his absolute will, a completely different kind of experiment was happening over in Europe. And this one wasn't born from strength, but from weakness.
And this brings us to our second blueprint. This model isn't based on a single visionary leader. Instead, it's all about a system of negotiated rules and laws that are designed to check power, not just project it.
So picture this. We're in England, and the king, a guy named King John, is in deep trouble. After a bunch of military and political blunders, his own nobles felt like they could finally challenge him. They basically cornered him and forced him to sign a document, a Charter of Liberties, and we know it today as the Magna Carta.
And this right here, this single clause, is the absolute game changer. It established a principle that would echo through the centuries, that nobody, not even the king, is above the law. This was the foundation for things like trial by jury and the radical idea that power has to follow the rules, a concept that would eventually shape constitutions all over the world.
So let's just put these two side by side for a second, right? You have two completely opposite blueprints for how to run a state. The Mongol model, all power, all law, all vision flows from one exceptional person. And then you have the English model, where power is held back by a system, by a set of rules that everyone, including the ruler, has to play by.
But what happens to a system that's built entirely around one person when that person's gone?
let's go back to the Mongol Empire to see the critical, fatal flaw in the conqueror's blueprint.
I mean, you have to understand, the entire system, the law, the army, the very idea of a unified Mongol people was held together by the sheer force of Chinggis Khan's will. His son Ogedei did a pretty good job of continuing that vision, but he didn't really plan for what came next. The whole system had a single point of failure.
And, spoiler alert, the system couldn't hold. It just couldn't. After the death of Chinggis's grandson Munk, the once unified empire just shattered. It broke apart into 4 competing successor states, or khanates, each ruled by one of his descendants. The single vision was gone, replaced by 4 competing ambitions.
And this is the real tragedy of it all, isn't it? Genghis Khan's goal was a united people overseeing a peaceful world. But his grandsons, they got consumed by what the sources call a lust for power. And they just threw that vision away. They started fighting each other, putting their own rule ahead of a united empire. The system, in the end, just couldn't outlive its creator.
And that leaves us with this huge question. In the long run, what's more resilient? An empire built on the genius of a single all-powerful leader? Or one built on a system of laws that can outlive any individual? The 13th century gave us 2 powerful answers, and you can still hear their echoes today. One blueprint planted the seeds for modern democracy. The other, even though it eventually collapsed, created an era of global connection that changed the world forever. The debate between those 2 ideas, well, it's still going on.